Hello, my name is Katie Stevens, and I'm the Director of the International Research Office of the U.S. Army Engineer Research and Development Center, or ERDIC. The International Research Office is a part of the Strategic Integration Office in the Executive Office of ERDIC. The ERDIC International Research Office is integral when it comes to international partnerships in research and development with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I'm going to give an overview presentation touching on the who, what, where, why, and how of the ERDIC International Research Office. First, I will give a little background to set the stage for those who might not be familiar with the ERDIC. The ERDIC is part of the Army's Science and Technology Enterprise, meaning the ERDIC does research and development for the Army. The ERDIC is a part of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and falls under the command of the Chief of Engineers. The ERDIC executes about 13% of the Army's science and technology budget, but that only makes up about 1/4 to 1/3 of ERDIC's business. In addition to the Army's direct science and technology funding, ERDIC does research for customers such as components of the DoD and other government agencies. The ERDIC is made up of 7 laboratories spread out geographically in Mississippi, Illinois, New Hampshire, and Virginia. ERDIC also has field offices in Alaska, Texas, Missouri, North Carolina, Virginia, Maine, and now, as you can see in the red box, the ERDIC International Research Office in London, England. So now I'm going to talk about the what and the where of the ERDIC International Research Office. The ERDIC International Research Office, or IRO, is a support organization, and as I mentioned in my introduction, it falls under the ERDIC Strategic Integration Office within the ERDIC Executive Office. In the late 1940s, the European Research Office was established under the director of the Waterways Experiment Station. In 2005, 6 years after the creation of ERDIC, from the separate U.S. Army Corps of Engineers laboratories, the European Research Office was renamed the ERDIC International Research Office. I am the 8th director of the IRO since the late 1970s. From its start in the 1940s, the IRO, then called the ERO, was located in London with the other Army, Navy, and Air Force European research offices. The IRO is currently located at Blenheim Crescent in Ruislip, which is on the far western side of London. The lovely front gate of Blenheim Crescent is pictured here. The IRO currently shares an office space with the U.S. Army Combat Capabilities Development Command Atlantic, or DEVCOM Atlantic, the U.S. Air Force European Office of Aerospace Research and Development, and the U.S. Office of Naval Research Global. The one mission of the IRO that has been constant since its inception is shown in the gray box, which is to promote cooperation with foreign researchers as a means of advancing scientific and engineering knowledge and technical capabilities in USACE mission relevant areas. On this slide, I'm showing the who of IRO. Firstly, the IRO itself is a very small office. It consists of myself and 1 executive assistant. My background before becoming the director of IRO is in education and civil engineering with an emphasis on structural engineering. I completed a PhD at Vanderbilt University studying nanotechnology and cement materials. I then spent 8 years in the Geotechnical and Structures Laboratory of ERDIC, leading research and development in the area of survivability, force protection, and weapons effects. My executive assistant here is Jules Richmond, who is a local national who has been the continuity within IRO for nearly 18 years. Jules has now worked with 5 directors within the IRO. He has a wealth of contacts within USACE, the Army, the DoD, and the international community. The IRO has a large group of stakeholders and significant touch points. Firstly, the IRO provides support to the greater ERDIC. This includes 7 laboratories and the cross-cutting research and development areas. The IRO works with the ERDIC Programs Office, Security, and the Office of Research and Technology Transfer to complete its mission. Outside of ERDIC, the IRO works with the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Defense Exports and Cooperation and the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment for Armaments Cooperation. I will discuss programs under armaments cooperation when I talk about the how of IRO. IRO also coordinates with USACE headquarters on all international cooperation and works with USACE headquarters on all international cooperation that's outside of armaments cooperation. Because of IRO's geographical location in Europe, IRO is a touch point for ERDIC with the USACE North Atlantic Division, EUCOM, AFRICOM, and similar organizations. The IRO is located with the other services, international research offices, to leverage resources and to act as a force multiplier. I work directly with DEVCOM, the DEVCOM Forward Element Centers, DEVCOM Atlantic, also the Air Force European Office of Aerospace Research and Development, and the Office of Naval Research Global. Lastly, of course, the IRO has touch points with the international community, including NATO. So now I have the why and the how left to talk about. I'm going to share several aspects over the next few slides of why international cooperation is important for research and development. Firstly, I want to talk about political, economic, industrial, technical, and operational drivers for international cooperation. The political motivation is to strengthen alliances and relationships with friendly countries and to promote international legitimacy and coalition operations. The economic motivation is simple. If we work with our partners, we will share cost, meaning that the financial burden is less for the US. The industrial driver is to boost domestic and partner industrial bases. The technical driver, I will talk about more over the next few slides, but the goal is to access the best defense technology worldwide and help minimize capability gaps with allies and coalition partners. Operationally, we want to increase military effectiveness through interoperability and partnership with allies and coalition partners. The image on the slide is a great example showing the impact of international cooperation for research and development. As you can see, for the Abrams main battle tank, at least 14 subcomponents were developed by or with international partners. Also notice on this Abrams example that there are 7 different partners that contributed to the overall system. I said that I'll talk more about the technical drivers for international cooperation and research and development. The first item that I want to talk about is academics. The US is the nation that has the most top-rated universities in the world. However, universities in Asian countries have been gaining on American and European universities consistently for many years. The data here is from 2 separate world rankings. The rankings are not exactly the same, but the trends are very similar. Even though the US has some great universities, 3/4 of the world's leading universities are outside of the United States. If you aren't convinced that international cooperation is important because of the strong academic programs overseas, then also please consider the research and development spending trends. The US accounted for 69% of research and development spending in 1960, and today the US accounts for 30% of the world's R&D spending, actually less than 30% of the world's R&D spending. The continuing large annual increases in Chinese R&D investments, which have been nonstop for more than 20 years, and the inability of the US to match those increases is expected to lead China to outspend the US in R&D for the very first time this year. The COVID-19 pandemic has aided China in likely surpassing the US in R&D investments this year. The gap between China and the US R&D investments is expected to widen over the next several years, assuming that the investments maintain a similar relationship. This is my last topic related to why we should do international cooperation. In my opinion, it isn't easy to measure innovation, but there are at least 2 global innovation index rankings available. The US ranks number 3 in the ranking by the World Intellectual Property Organization, and it ranks number 11 in the ranking done by Bloomberg. The US is not viewed as the most innovative country in the world. In addition, I am sharing a global startup ecosystem map, which shows regions where large numbers of startups are located. The US has a lot of startups, and it's the most friendly country for startups, but it is clear that the startup ecosystems are located all over the globe. So lastly, I'm going to discuss the how. This is the how IRO enables ERDC and works with USACE to partner with the international community. Firstly, IRO, before cooperation, assists ERDC in communicating and coordinating. This involves communicating to align across the DoD International S&T enterprise, to outreach, to identify new partners, and to find new technologies. And also for coordinating, it's to prioritize programs, identify technology gaps, develop agreements, identify funding, and exchange information. When it comes to cooperation, IRO enables ERDC through armaments cooperation and security cooperation. In general, the various mechanisms for international cooperation are listed here on the right. There are different mechanisms depending on if you are working with a foreign government, a university, or a company. For working with foreign governments, we use international agreements, and for working with universities and companies, we use contracts and cooperative research and development agreements. When it comes to armaments cooperation, there are many programs to assist the cooperation. This is the Armaments Cooperation Toolkit. At the top of the toolkit, you have your information exchange annexes and project arrangements. In addition, there's the Technical Cooperation Program, TTCP, and NATO cooperations. Down below to the left is programs for working with foreign industry. The Foreign Technology and Science Assessment Support, FTAS program, provides funding for technology readiness level 1 to 5 technology development and assessment. The Foreign Comparative Testing, FCT program, will fund technology readiness level 6+ technology assessment. Just under the lock on the toolkit, there are research grants for basic research. This is typically seed funding to get a cooperation with a foreign university or company started. On the right-hand side for cooperation with foreign government, we have the International Cooperative Research and Development, ICR&D program, and the Coalition Warfare Program, CWP. Both of these programs provide funds for US researchers to work with foreign government. The Coalition Warfare Program can provide over $1 million a year. Lastly, at the very bottom of the toolkit is the Engineer and Scientist Exchange Program, ECEP. This allows a US scientist or engineer to go work with a foreign government overseas, or it allows a foreign researcher to come work in the US. As you can see from the Armaments Cooperation Toolkit, there are many programs there to help facilitate international partnerships. This is the end of my presentation. I hope you learned a little bit about the who, what, where, why, and how of the ERDC International Research Office. Thank you for your time, and if you would like additional information, please do not hesitate to reach out to the email address provided on this slide.